Live. I do it just for Alex's smile. I do it just for that smile. Welcome, everyone, to CASA Live. It is Saturday. We are here. Kristen's internet looks like it's holding up great this week. So, cross fingers. I think we're all set there. Skip, I see you in chat. Hello. You were early. Mallory.
Very early.
Philip is here. Adrian, thanks for hanging out with us this Saturday. Thank you, guys. Thobai is here. Mark Sliss is here. Mark, thank you again for this past Wednesday joining us on the CASA Twitter space. Thank you. Much appreciated. That was an excellent conversation we had. So welcome, everybody. Welcome. I have some weird camera angle things going on. I don't know. I'm messing around with it. I apologize if everybody's like, Logan, you got to stop moving this camera. Man, I'm trying here, you guys. I'm trying. So we do have a special guest, which we're going to be bringing on in just a moment. I already see some people excited in chat. We're going to just kind of breeze right past, hey, how are yous? We'll do a quick one. I just can't help myself. Alex.
I'm good. I'm still cold, but I'm good.
Okay, good. Alex or Kristen, hey, how are you?
That was it. We just had an ice storm, and that's about all the news that happens in northern Wisconsin these days. So
just
that's
ice. Ice. Alex is still kind of cold. I have plenty of sunshine. We're good to go. If everybody is ready, without further ado, we will get into this here show and bring our guest on. Alex, do you have some of your? Are we finger guns? Does that mean you're good to go? All right,
go for it.
Pew. Let's do the thing. And our special guest this week is Dr. Cheryl Olson. How are you?
Great, thank you. I love your elaborate introduction. I feel honored.
I try. Showmanship is the only real thing I can bring to the table here at CASA, so I do my best.
Well, it is appreciated.
Thank you. So tell us right out of the gate here, for folks here who have no idea who you are. I just learned a lot about you, at least from links that I was given. They were like, Logan, research this human before we bring her on the show. Tell our audience here a little bit about yourself, and maybe I get to learn a little bit more too.
Sure. I should say some people might know me from my work in video game violence, if any of your listeners are gamers or watchers, because I wrote a book called Grand Theft Childhood. That was one of the first academic study to break through and say, hey, maybe video games are not always terrible and evil.
Right.
And
it's not the satanic panic that a lot of people think
Right. And I've sometimes talked about the moral panic about video game violence as being similar in many ways to the panic about vaping. And I can bore you with that at length later.
Please do.
Okay. Otherwise, I think I came across your radar because of a piece I guess published in Tobacco Reporter, which my husband always formats these for me. It's called Watch Your Mouth. What the industry can't and could say about harm reduction. I've been writing for Tobacco Reporter for about a year now. And just background to back way up, I am one of those public health people. I spent 15 years or so on the faculty of Harvard Medical School and was a researcher in the Department of Psychiatry at Mass General Hospital. I had something called the Center for Mental Health and Media that I co-founded. And we did research on youth risk behavior and stigma of mental illness and a variety of other things. And while I was there, I have a doctorate in public health from Harvard. And while I was running this research center, I had friends of mine who were, this is in the early 2000s, saying, hey, I guess I got a grant from PMUSA. They have a PhD who's working with them now, and they're doing harm reduction work. And they gave us money to do some radio programming about harm reduction. And you should go talk to them about funding your new center, because if any of you know academia, it's a constant money grubbing situation for most people. You're constantly looking for grant funding, whatever you can get, especially Harvard, whose slogan was something like every tub on its own bottom, meaning you're on your own, kid, bring in your own money and we'll take a cut of it.
Harvard, perfect. Yeah.
That's one reason that I'm not in academia full time anymore. I got a little tired of that, but I first I thought you want us to go talk to a tobacco company, and we went. They had not moved to. This was so long ago. They were still in Manhattan. They had not yet moved to Virginia. And I remember walking in there for a meeting and feeling like You know, those people from the animal rights advocates used to throw paint on people with fur coats. I almost felt like some some anti-tobacco advocate will come and dump an ashtray on my head or something and saying, "How dare you go and talk to them?" So it was very weird. And at that time, Howard Willard was the head of, I think, advocacy or outreach then, and he was there, and Jennifer Hunter and some other people. And we I almost felt like we're strange dogs sniffing each other and circling, like, are we going to play? Are we going to fight? What is this okay? And they showed us a little, PowerPoint, and we talked. And, long story short, I ended up working with them. What they wanted to do, they said, look, our research shows that smokers who use our products, they feel that if they want to quit, that we ought to help them, that it should be our job to help them quit. And we want to move toward this was, before the Center for Tobacco Products happened in the FDA. They wanted to move toward regulation because they wanted predictability in their litigation environment. Let's face it. So they said, we want to do something that will build off the Surgeon General's 5 keys to quitting. And I ended up, forming a task force or advisory group and putting together something called Quit Assist, which you can still get on my website. I have it up there. Oh, I guess, where did I put it? I guess I had it here. Oh, here it is.
I've got it shared up here.
Okay, yeah, it still exists.
Yeah.
They have some things on their site, and you can download the booklet from my site. I have it archived there, and the resources in it are old. I don't think they actively add to this anymore. But the booklet I know a lot of people liked having the booklet because they felt they could take the little booklet and kind of carry it around in their pocket. A friend of mine said it had totemic value, psychologist. But one of the things, it was really eye-opening for me to work on that project, because the reason I did it was that in public health, often you get enough funding to do maybe 5,000 4-color brochures and get them out to some health departments or some such. By working with Big Tobacco, I was able to get this stuff. I think that they did hundreds of thousands of copies that went out to dentists and doctors' offices, HMOs, to people who requested all kinds of things. And then we had an additional project, a youth smoking prevention project, which my husband headed. He's a psychologist, and I was involved in as well. And they did, I think it was 75 million brochures for parents, and they were stapling them to major magazines and putting them on, they could control the real estate on the shelves of convenience stores and drugstores and so on. So it was just mind-blowingly beyond anything I'd ever been able to be a part of. And they were able to afford doing a proper job of evaluating. And one of the things that really opened my mind, I never was a smoker. And we did focus groups of smokers with the initial versions of this guide to see what people would like. We had lots of quotes from expert this, psychiatrist this, psychologist that, doctor that. And people right away were saying, I don't want to hear from all these doctors. They are basically people who shame me and don't know what they're talking about. I want to hear from the real experts, people who have quit smoking already. And I was like, oh, duh. And so we rewrote those parts to take out the names of the doctors. And I interviewed a bunch of people who had been successful quitters about, what worked for them. And we worked those into the guide. They took pictures of models, unfortunately, to go with the quotes, but the quotes are from the real people. And that's the part that's still good if you want to get a copy of it. Then the rest of it was linking to resources available at that time from the government and groups like the Lung Association, which were not nearly as numerous as they are now. So that was my experience. And I remember having to talk to public health saying, why on earth would you do such a thing? Basically, like, how did you got big tobacco on you? How do you want to get that on you? And if I talk to you, will I get it on me? It's almost the way that it feels. And I talked to them about, this is a chance to have this massive outreach. And I was told later that some people from government told people at Philip Morris USA, psst, your stuff is the biggest single referral to the government quitting resources at this time, going through Quit Assist. I don't think they ever publicly said that. And
No.
And I
Why
think,
would
and,
they?
it's, and I know I later met Joe Gitchell of Penny Associates who did Chantix, and he said, I had wanted to use the Quitistix ad for Chantix. They wouldn't let me. And and the government campaigns that came out after seemed very similar to what we did with Quitassist. So I felt like I met my goal. I influenced, I helped a lot of people, and I'm willing to take some heat for that. And I said, look, to my colleagues, look, not only if I don't do this, they'll get someone who'll be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll take tobacco industry funding. And they'll do the same old thing that doesn't work. They'll, whereas if I'm there, if they are sneaky or underhanded or try to distort something in any way, I can call them out. I can go to the press and say, I collaborated with them on this and they betrayed me, or they betrayed public health is what they did. And I also can make sure everything's based on the latest research. We footnoted everything up the wazoo. And so I felt that was a responsible thing for me to do if I wanted to make a difference. So, and then I kind of exited that area for a while. Oh, that's another piece that I wrote for Tobacco Reporter. You've got
I was putting that up because you were just talking about how you, when you get into that, you kind of jump into all the attitudes that come with it, and it just sort of sticks to you. And all these links are in the description, you guys. But this is another fascinating article that she wrote that kind of goes along with what you were saying about that. Why would you get into that? And now you're just tainted and, throwing things on you type of thing, even though, yeah.
And I know other people who've suffered professionally from doing much less than I did. But yeah, that article, Grandfathered Attitudes, I wrote for people. I had the example of Juul in mind in a way. I did a very tiny amount of consulting for them, like summarizing some research for them to use. But my impression was that they came in thinking, we're disrupting. I live in Silicon Valley, right? So there's disrupting happening all over the place around me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they really thought through that when you're disrupting something that's an addictive product, it's not like making a new competitor to a tech product. It's a whole different thing. And they didn't realize, in the eyes of public health and politicians and so on, you're not disrupting. Rather the legacy of bad behavior, big tobacco, is now chained to your leg. And you're dragging it around forever. And if they had understood that from the beginning, I think they would have, had a much easier time. But I can understand why they didn't. But I wrote that piece called Grandfathered Attitudes. People talk about grandfathering of products, hence the attitudes, because you need to know that anybody who meets with you is going to be thinking, okay, big tobacco tattooed on your forehead. So you've got to right away figure out, how do I deal with this credibility issue so that they can even begin to listen to anything coming out of my mouth.
Right. Yeah.
That article was, I went back and read a bunch of your stuff, and that one I really recommend people. You were talking about like Joe Camel in that article, and just how that kind of stuff still sticks, because as soon as like vape industry got into stuff, they would put cartoony looking stuff on their products. And this idea that adults don't like cartoons just kind of ignores the fact of, The Simpsons and Family Guy.
Well, I watch Rick and Morty once in a while late at night when my husband's not doing something else.
I know one of the questions I had for you on that particular article was, do you think that anybody actually started smoking because of Joe Camel?
Oh gosh.
I've always come this one that we've gotten in debates about on this show. I've said, no way. I think that's not what causes people to smoke.
I know most people I talk to who smoke will say it was because my family and friends smoked. I do think that, but certainly we all do things, like the brand of jeans I wear, the shoes I wear, something. We're always signaling things about ourselves, even if we don't mean to. There's always some underlying thing. And I know the thought with Joe Camel was this is signaling kind of macho-ness at some level. The very crotch-like appearance of the face. I think of a nice way to say this. And,
the phallus.
That may have, with the certain risk-taking family and friends smoking using demographic, might have influenced the brand that they used. I'm not sure whether it influenced them starting, but I do think it probably influenced the brand at the very least. One of the difficulties with looking at research like this is often if people are studying stuff like this or studying the effects of a campaign to see if they can change minds, sometimes the same government agency that paid for the campaign also pays for the evaluations. The evaluators know what's wanted. And believe me, as someone who knows how this research works, there are ways to, everybody has to get food on the table, right? I'm not saying they're lying. I'm just saying that everybody knows going into it what the situation is.
Right.
But that's a whole nother topic. So you can see, I don't mind poking the bear a little bit. After I stopped, that stuff with the Quit Assist was an aside thing. And I got back to my main, I was doing my main work at Harvard. And one of the biggest things I did was a big video game violence project. I got a grant from through back just before they stopped doing earmarks. A congressman who thought that video games like Grand Theft Auto sincerely thought that they might be really undermining the fabric of our society and causing violence. I got $1.5 million of government money. And you can imagine the happy little students I hired to be my employees saying, look, Mom, I got hired to do video games at Harvard. Isn't this great? We bought a bunch of, used PlayStations and things like that. And we did a bunch of qualitative and quantitative research, which is also on my website if that's your thing. And but I didn't know when I got into that how big the moral panic was. And that really informed a lot of what I understand now about vaping. But that got me. I used to do before I went back to academia full time. My husband had was a psychologist who'd done a lot of media, and we had our own health communications company. And so I like being behind the camera. I don't like or producing or writing or something else. But I ended up doing a ton of media, including Penn and Teller's Bullshit that's out there as an episode talking about video game violence. And did media all over the world about it. And it was a really fun experience, but I suck at playing video games. I always felt like a bit of a fraud because just like I said, I've never smoked. So I always feel like, so if I'm going to be an expert, I have to have a little asterisk next to my name, the expert with a lot of theory and who will ask a lot of questions, but doesn't know what it's really like. So that's one reason I like being involved with you all. And then I got back into this at the end of 2017. Pinney Associates asked me to do some papers reviewing the Surgeon General's report and so on. And I presented something at a conference that I did with my husband about media coverage of vaping and how it goes so wrong. Why they pick up these crazy things like formaldehyde or something. And that's on my site too, an article about that. But then I met up with some people, including Willie McKinney. He has a company called McKinney RSA doing regulatory stuff. And he came out of big tobacco and is now on his own. And we now collaborate to help, medium-sized and larger companies. The small ones, frankly, they can't afford our help. So I can only help them as a volunteer, which I try to do like today to get, find creative ways to do the research that the FDA wants and to try to help as much as possible move things forward at this time when everything is so crazy and where I feel really angry at the way the public health community, much of it has distorted the research and gone off on, I understand where they're coming from. There's this big tobacco stuff was so egregious. And most people in my tribe of researchers and academics and so on, we don't know any smokers. We don't know. It feels like it's gone away. It feels like, they must only be smoking because big tobacco is pushing them to do it. There's just not an understanding of. I have one colleague of mine who was at Boston University who worked with a lot of low-income smokers, and he was a big help for me in understanding, saying, look, a lot of people have, crappy lives, and the cigarette is something that they use to manage their mood. The cigarette is something they use to, it's a relaxation. You're trying to help me understand what it's, because it was just all alien to me. And I felt really stupid, frankly, after I got a little bit more oriented, because I'd had those same prejudices thinking, they must be dumb. They must not know. They must not. And then I have to look at, well, what do I do in my own life? What about all the things that I'm doing that are not optimally healthy or that are emotionally based or what have you? And is the point of life to do everything logically? And then you get off into philosophy. But so I started,
you got to live a little from time to time, right?
Yeah. I have a chocolate problem, a definite chocolate problem.
First of all, I want to commend you for not saying that you have a chocolate addiction. Thank you for not.
No, it's not.
Diluting the
I
conversation
think addiction is a very overused word. And, there's certain things I just don't buy at Trader Joe's because I will eat them till I'm sick. And then I will set them aside for 3 hours, and then I will eat them till I'm sick and set them aside until it's gone.
Oh, that's me on Chinese food night.
Okay. But Chinese food is those maple leaf cookies. Oh my God. I don't know what they put in those maple leaf cookies. I literally cannot buy those things. But anyway, so I had left academia a while ago because my husband got a job running a big foundation in DC, and I didn't want to do all the long distance stuff. And so now I'm in a position, late career person, where I can say, look, what I want to do is bring people together. I want to bring together industry and academia, journalists and doctors, advocacy folks, and really get them to try to talk to each other and try to share knowledge and to try to go down this journey together where, we don't know, certainly in 20 years or 30 years, I'm sure we'll know a lot about, oh, damn, that flavor of vaping or that chemical formula or that product, this particular group shouldn't use or has this health effect. But just because we don't know that now, we do know that I think I put in a piece I did in Tobacco Reporter recently, a woman I met who used to work for I think for BAT said, something like, it's not the nicotine that kills you, it's the nasties in the smoke. And I loved her British phrasing, the nasties in the smoke. And I just said, I want people to understand it's the nasties in the smoke that does most of the killing. It's not the nicotine.
Yeah.
And you have to, and I want to point them to things like Public Health England's information. I love that video that they did, which I want to put on my link on my site, where they showed that glass jar.
Oh, the cotton balls.
Yeah, where you see full of cotton balls, and you see all the dirty crap coming in from the cigarettes and from the vaping. It's just a little wet. I showed that to a 14-year-old acquaintance of mine, and he was like, "Whoa!" And it completely changed his mind. That's a wonderful example of how this is. It's not safe. You never use the word safe, God forbid, but it's 95% less risky about that much. And I think
over.
Yeah. So
to be honest, over 95%.
Right. I'm being conservative. I'm trying to.
95 is conservative.
Yeah, it is. I have
college.
Right. I have no doubt. And I know one thing I should mention too is another reason we do this is both of my husband's parents died from of cancer, colon cancer, they were smokers before he was 18. Mm-hmm. And if someone ever asks him, how dare you consult to industry, he'll say, hey, both of my, if you imagine if a product like a Juul or any of these other, vapes had been available when my parents were smoking, I would have had a very different life. Sure. And that usually shuts them up.
Well, it's funny because we often see the exact opposite argument made. If you're on Twitter or something like that, people will say, oh, these things are horrible. Both my parents died from smoking. These are horrible. And we're like, I think you're missing the point here, because they'll say smoking's horrible, vaping, but a lot of people have been convinced that vaping's as bad or worse than smoking. So they don't see any difference, I think, is part of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've gone through my little backstory. What would you like us to talk about in the rest of our time?
Oh gosh.
Well, I had a couple of questions, comments, and so on. The one thing I know that this is a year-old article, but it was touching back on the grandfathered attitudes.
Yeah.
The opening in that article references the CEOs of tobacco companies in front of Congress, and this has always bothered me because immediately, as you noted in your article, the New York Times turned around and reported this as CEOs say that cigarettes aren't addictive. But the reality of the situation is that that's not the question that they were answering. There were two CEOs who said they didn't believe that nicotine or their products or cigarettes were addictive. But the rest of them, I believe, actually answered the question correctly, which was from Ron Wyden, do you believe nicotine is addictive? And I have this thing with language. This is why I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Immediately in my head, I think, okay, well, what do the nicotine gum manufacturers have to say about their products? And I went and saw Glaxo has a little, quick FAQ about is nicotine gum addictive? They don't actually talk about whether or not that their product is addictive. They talk about being able to use it to wean yourself off of smoking and nicotine eventually. And it's very clearly stated that we know that nicotine is addictive. And the more nuanced definitions of addiction do incorporate some degree of harm or self-harm in continuing to use a product that we know is dangerous. But nicotine in and of itself doesn't really fit that description. And moreover, it seems that when we have this conversation about the drug is addictive, we're actually assigning magical powers to these molecules that they just don't have. It's the set and setting and all of the risk factors and reasons for why people would use a drug. And of course, I understand, we can get into the finer points of reinforcing, whether it's reinforcing marketing or reinforcing aspects of certain drugs. Obviously, flavors are part of that conversation now, being accused or being fingered for why kids continue to use vapor products because of the flavor. It's that reinforcing effect of a pleasant flavor. And so I just thought that was a really interesting point, and that is sort of one of these legacy attitudes about all of this that is not limited to nicotine, but it's this belief that drugs have magical powers, and that somehow, whether you're talking about dealers on the street or a tobacco company, that those people, those organizations, they're responsible for us getting hooked on drugs.
Yeah.
But I've always believed, or not always, but I have my own experience with substance use recovery, and it's to me that narrative, in a way, sort of takes away my agency and dismisses my ability to. Even somebody who wants to quit smoking is affirmatively making the decision to switch to a smoke-free nicotine product and wean themselves off of nicotine. How can they do that if nicotine is so horribly addictive?
Yeah, I can tell you, a public health person coming to that would say, well, then why don't they all quit? It's
sure.
This gets into such, 5 different kinds of philosophical, biological, there are just so many different aspects to what you're saying. I'm not even sure I can begin to untangle it. And that's a whole other 3-hour conversation, which is so cool. I agree with you on the power of language and nuance. And in fact, that photograph, I'm not sure if I mentioned the article, people will say that's them swearing nicotine's not addictive. And that's not what it was at all. It was them being sworn in at the beginning of the thing. But that's because of the idea in the public mind. That's how it comes out. But I don't think you win hearts and minds by going into the philosophical arguments about nicotine. If you're going to talk to a different tribe, let's say, if you're going to talk to journalists or doctors or so on, I think, and that's, if I can get back to the focus of the article that I just did about why industry doesn't do more to counteract these myths. The one thing that came up when I was talking to people on background, for obvious reasons, about why industry doesn't do more. I mean, they have to face, just to summarize, they have shareholders, and right now the money is being made by the big companies from the combustible products, and ideally they're using a lot of that money to transition and research the other products. But they've got shareholders, they've got litigation risk, they've got people watching them and saying, okay, all the bad things you did before. Oh, are you thinking about collaborating with a physician? Oh, it's just like all those ads you used to run with the doctors in white coats saying Luckies are less dangerous or whatever. Everything they do is being scrutinized. But and then the regulators are often, they're afraid of angering the FDA, and who can blame them by doing anything that might be like, well, I don't know if that's okay to do that. I mean, then of course they're going to be risk averse. And something I heard, multiple times was the advocacy groups. Basically, advocacy groups, they're the ones who have to save us. They're the ones who have the freedom to speak. And and maybe there's something more industry could do to support them and having to figure it out. But they have to be careful, because anytime industry tries to gather together and say, well, let's pool some money or let's pool something to help. Oh, that's the Tobacco Institute all over again, isn't it? All that bad stuff, even though the people who work there now, most of them were in diapers or not born when this bad stuff was happening. Too bad. It's their company now. So, so that's where I think, you guys have the credibility. And that's one thing that I think is so important to think about is telling your stories. And I don't know if that's something I haven't seen. I apologize that I haven't looked at your site as carefully. And I don't know, I know you have some videos. I don't know if you have short videos of people telling their stories of quitting through vaping, but I sure hope you do. Or have
Well, what
links
we
to
do
those
have,
stories.
if you do head over to our site, and I'm sure Alex can pull it up right now, is we do have a page on our site with testimonies.
Okay.
And we currently have over 13,000 testimonies from people
Wow.
in regards to sharing
Oh, that's
their
fantastic.
stories, exactly what you're saying. So we don't have 13,000 videos, but we do absolutely have
Mhm.
thousands and thousands. Yeah, 13,416 right now.
And we actually, as far as videos, our website, our YouTube channel has shared a whole. We have a whole what do you call it? Section. That's not the right term for YouTube, but we have a whole section that is just videos from the oldies but goodies and any basically testimonials like that I come across. But we have
are you talking about the golden oldies, the
Golden
golden
Oldies,
oldies
that's it.
capital tour?
The
Yeah,
golden
that's
oldies,
what
yeah,
it
not
is.
oldies but
Yeah.
That's
goodies.
from a different person, Lindsay Stroud, who
Yes,
a lot
yes.
of our fans know.
Yeah.
Um,
But I share those on our channel, so I link to them. Playlist. Thank you, Neff. You just put
Yeah.
them in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
we have
love
a playlist of all their stuff.
I'd love to
So-
see you set something up on your site where you see the little screen still shots of a few folks. We could say click and see so and so's story, and just get a few of the ones that are concise and reasonably, have reasonable audio and stuff. I always feel that audio quality is much more important than video quality. I say as a former video producer.
Oh, yeah. As somebody who's been doing content creation for years now, it's all
Right.
audio. You can
Okay,
deal with
great.
somebody's poor camera or whatever, but if you can't hear somebody, it's
Then
over.
you're like, screw this.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
over.
Exactly. So, but one of the big things I want to tell people is, what things you have to know about my tribe of public health academic type people is, we don't know smokers and we don't know the products. And I think what's critical, one of the most important things from my perspective that advocacy people can help us with is putting faces on smokers. Because when people think, if they're regulators or your doctor, or a journalist, or, thinking about, vaping, what they've heard, their gut reaction is going to be, oh, vaping, that's the bad stuff that's trying to hook kids with the flavors. Or that's something I found in my kid's backpack, or I'm afraid of finding in their backpack. They don't, and they know teenagers, but they don't know smokers. So the teenagers have a face, my kid, my niece, my neighbor, but they need to counter, if they're ever going to balance that and weigh these things the way that the FDA says they want to weigh it, they need to have faces on those smokers. And that's something you guys can do. And if the ideal thing would be when they're reading about this stuff, to have them think, wait, what about Charlotte in Memphis, whose story I saw, who used that, who started out using a tobacco vape, and it just kept her thinking about cigarettes, and she switched to cherry pie, whatever it would be. And I think also, frankly, one of the things we just got some feedback from the FDA on something that we asked some questions about, a research program. And one thing that became very clear is that we were trying to, posit that, hey, liquid, the refillable vapes seem to be showing up much less in the use surveys than say the disposables, especially something like Puff Bar now. And, could you FBA, are you basically going to see if they were willing to acknowledge that, yeah, that's what the surveys are showing, is that, tank style vapes, forgive me if I use the wrong terminology here, I'm not a native, but that those are much less popular among youth. I mean, let's face it, youth, that involves an investment and money and planning, two things teenagers aren't great with, just that alone. But the surveys just aren't showing it. But they were not buying that. They were basically saying, no, I mean, that all, flavored vapes are all bad. They're all youth attracting, and just really reiterating they have a high bar. Interestingly, menthol was not a flavor in their mind. But
it's funny too, prior to Gottlieb leaving the FDA to spend time with his family or whatever he said he was going to go do, he acknowledged that youth were using, pod style devices, things like that, and what did he contraptions? Is this? I believe that's what he called like bigger, mod tank style boxes, contraptions. And he said they're not using contraptions, and it felt like at one point we were getting some at least acknowledgement in this separation of these products and what youths were accessing, what they were getting, and what older former smokers were using, things like this. And then kind of after Gottlieb left, that kind of thinking, that acknowledgement seemed to just kind of vanish.
Well,
and we were kind of back to all vapes are the same thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, really they are. But as far as, youth having access to products like this, or what they're using, like you're talking about in these surveys, we don't even really see that acknowledgement now.
I try to, as I said, I try to build bridges. And I'm trying to think, okay, if putting on my hat of thinking like an FDA person might think, they're under tremendous attack from, advocacy groups and political forces and so on. And right now, I mean, if I think of when I was in grad school at the end of the last century, I was getting my doctorate. And back then, everyone was concerned about youth and alcohol, especially on college campuses. Because again, they knew college students, right? But they don't know as many high school dropouts who are drinking just as much. But flavored alcohol, Pops, that was a huge deal. And everybody was freaking out about that. And now I go to my local grocery in California, and there's big stacks of White Claw flavored seltzer, the same flavors as vapes are being sold as, watermelon and mango and everything. No one says anything. And I'm thinking, oh my God, flavored alcohol will kill you now from a car crash or alcohol poisoning or a risky sex or whatever. Vaping, even if it does turn out to have risks here, they're not going to kill your child today. It's no way. I don't
think cigarettes.
Imagine
down the line.
So why? But what that tells me, and also my experience with video game violence and the moral panic about that, is that the great wheel of moral panics, it turns. And
there's always one going.
Yeah. And we know, I personally think it's going to next go to marijuana and youth, because people are too relaxed right now about it, in my mind. But the wheel will turn. And I think that moral panic has probably already crested. And the Valley misconception, made that much worse. And I think it's starting to roll back a bit. I think we're seeing the peak now. But in the meantime, we're stuck with it. We have to wait. We have to do our best to counteract that in the meantime while that rolls back. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to get, as a researcher, when I look through the research out there about, I was just trying to find some stuff about adult use of flavors and quitting. And I was looking for, where's the qualitative? Where's the details? Because you can collect all of these wonderful stories on your site, which you definitely should, but that's always considered anecdotal evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you collect it in a systematic way with clear goals from the front and standardized questions, which is one of the things that I do as a researcher, it's still anecdotal and so on. But I'm looking for these studies, and I'm like, where are the studies? They're just not, again, someone has to pay for this, right? Research doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't, flower and fruit and fall to the ground and get gathered up by journals. Somebody has to pay for research to happen. And there haven't been people able to pay for all this research, especially the qualitative research. And that's what we really need. And that's one of the things I'm working, I'm hoping to do over the next year or so is find some ways to support qualitative studies, on how are people using tobacco flavor, menthol flavor, and then other flavors to quit, and what is benefiting who? How is it working? Anecdotally, I hear, and you would know much, much more about this, that some people will start with a tobacco flavor because it's familiar, and then they segue to a different flavor, and then that helps keep them possibly from relapsing because the association with cigarettes is broken. And then other people may just want to start immediately with a fruit, and there are people I understand who prefer to go with a flavorless because they don't want to mess with all those flavors. And but we need to understand that. And one thing that the public health people really care about is vulnerable populations, and that can be teenagers, that could be elderly, that could be homeless. I just did some work with prison vaping. If you can, and also ethnic minorities, low, people with less education. if you kind of work with the language and values of the public health people and say, look, we're finding that this vulnerable subpopulation is, who they're stubbornly not quitting smoking, their rates are really high, or they have a higher rate of damage, or they're starting younger, what have you. If we can show this group is, disproportionately quitting with flavors, and flavors are maybe possibly helping them not roll back and relapse to smoking, that's something that I think could be very persuasive. And even just getting that out there in the terms of some stories, and having people say, here is why the flavor makes a difference for me that a tobacco flavor does not. Just, helping them understand it, and getting very specific as to how it works for them. And I think that's tremendously valuable.
When you say, okay, and in all honesty, you're preaching to the choir about that. I mean, that's one of the things that's why we have our testimonial project. That's why we were partnering with another group and also collecting even more testimonials, why we've got the videos. We're constantly putting out there that adults like flavors. We need these flavors. Here's all these stories. If you look at our testimonials, you will see thousands of adults saying, this saved my life. One just posted in our chat right here. The problem is getting out of our bubble, because
we've even, not necessarily CASA, but campaigns, by consumers have been made where there's a huge one years ago where everybody had these signs. And it was a huge social media campaign. And it was, I quit smoking with this flavor. I smoked for this many years. They were posted everywhere. Yeah. Hashtags were shared. I mean, thousands upon thousands, real people, real faces holding up these signs, sharing their stories, and maybe every now and again you get a little snippet from like a local news or something about it, but it never seems to gain, the public health awareness traction that we need it to gain, because it is more like there's like a wall. It's not necessarily that we're not doing all of these things. We're not breaking that silo, like Kristen said. We're not
getting in front of the right eyes.
Yeah, we're not getting it in front of the right eyes. Or when we do get it in front of the right eyes, we're shoved off as victims or social media bots or shills for tobacco companies or whatever it may be. And that's one of the most frustrating things for me, at least as an advocate, is, we have lived experience. We're right there. We're reading the most recent research that's coming out. We're sharing this. We're disseminating the best information we can. We're doing our own campaigns. We're doing what we're able to do here, but then we're kind of met with just the same.
You're not stakeholders
of it's.
We're not considered.
So my question, I guess, to kind of frame that as a question is like, in your experience, what's our best way to kind of break through that wall and get all of this stuff we've been doing for years and years in front of the right people, in front of the right eyes, to make those, to change those opinions.
Bearing in mind that we are grassroots AF.
Bearing in mind we're grassroots. I mean, we don't have that nice Bloomberg money.
Yeah, people are always
asking, if you're listening, you want to change your tune. I mean, look.
I really, why don't you put out, do this campaign, put out ads, take out full page ads, do commercials. We're like, we don't have the money for that. Hire lobbyists. We don't have the money for that.
And I'm not sure that would be credible. I think slick is your enemy. I think things that are a little bit rough actually are more credible in this situation, right? But I do think, the key is I think what it's like people have they're closed-minded. They think they know, they think they've got the idea. You have to kind of crack their brain open a little bit to let some light in and let them hear you. And I think the way you have to do that is to surprise them in some way. I mean, one thing that surprised me just the other day was seeing this Federal Trade Commission report saying smoking has increased for the first time in many years.
I have a question about that you might be able to answer, actually, because I've seen reports of cigarette sales going up in 2020.
Yeah, I guess.
And I'm curious if there's research behind that just being, people stocking up for fear of being in public, not going out as much, reducing their travel given the pandemic, or if we're seeing an actual rise in individuals, like in the number of people.
The data I have, and I put a link on my site to this. It's an FTC press release that links to a larger report, which I've not read the larger report, but that was talking about billions of cigarettes shipped to wholesalers and retailers. So from that, and that's from that, I can't extrapolate. I know anecdotally, I've seen sort of talk among researchers and things that people that the Valley, being mistakenly attributed to vaping
Was a mistake.
and then just the relentless anti-flavors and that vape, this messing up the waters. I'm sure you've seen the surveys showing that physicians as well as regular folks think that nicotine is what's killing you. And if you think nicotine is what's killing you, giving you heart disease or cancer instead of the smoke, then of course, why should you switch from cigarettes to something else? Because it's all nicotine, right?
It's pure nicotine.
Yeah, it makes that whole rationale for harm reduction and going down the continuum of risk goes away if you have this misperception about nicotine. So that's I think that's what happened, is that the nicotine issue got all muddied up. People heard about vaping is bad, and there may have been cigarette promotions going on thing as well. I would not have been seeing that because that's not where I'm traveling. But I think some people are sort of like under duress and stress. More people are using, any kind of substance, whether it's chocolate or nicotine or something, under this horrible time we've all lived through. They're looking for something to reduce stress. So I think it's really not surprising that smoking seems to have gone up. And I think they've seen that in other countries as well. But I can't attribute the fine grain level as to where it's happening. But I think that's something that is surprising to people. And I also put a link to an article about, it's a few years old now, but about smoking among the Medicaid population. People have this assumption that smoking is just going away on its own. And if you look at the data on, the low income Americans in Medicaid, a lot of these are folks with health issues, mental health issues, and so on, vulnerable populations, right? The smoking is just sort of stuck. It's not going down. And I recently was doing research related to prisoners and vaping, and oh my gosh, these poor folks, if they can't, if they don't have something to smoke, if they're in these smoke-free prisons, they're shredding up nicotine patches, mixing them with tea and smoking them. They're collecting spit out chew that the guards spit out in the yard and sweeping it up and drying it out, rolling it up in toilet paper wrappers or Bible pages and smoke. It's just unbelievable. I mean, it's so clear. And these are folks with very high, histories of trauma. Research shows that almost half of them maybe have a diagnosable substance use disorder. So these are people who need stuff. I mean, and there's research on Scottish prisons, but I've got to put on my web.
I've seen that one.
It's amazing. Scotland. Yep. Oh, wow.
I think we shared that link.
If you're trying to open up someone's mind who's saying, vaping is all terrible, say, let me take a pure example. People in prison who have all of these addiction, other problems, and they're going to use we know, we've seen in multiple countries, including the US, Mississippi just last year made smoking, start selling cigarettes again in prisons. I think it was Mississippi. I might have the state wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's them. Because they said there's just so much contraband, millions of dollars in contraband going through. We just can't fight it anymore. And so we're going to start selling cigarettes again because we can't, it's just not, there is no such thing as a smoke-free prison, clearly.
No.
Yeah.
Somebody designed an e-cig that actually is prison safe. It can't be used as a shim or whatever.
Yes. I mean, I worked with a company that was doing that. And there's several companies that have done that. I think most of them did not file for PMTAs. I think at least a couple did, including one that I worked with.
I believe.
But the thing with, I'm sorry?
At one point, I believe Vice actually covered, I want to say it was Vice, I could be wrong, covered that a story about a company that was making vapes for prisons. They were all like a thin plastic kind of thing.
Yeah, specialty things with a silicone and see-through, and you can't stab and you can't smuggle, and the battery can't explode on you. Yeah, that's a whole, I don't want to talk about that too much because my clients, PMTA is still under review, and I have to be very protective because these prisoners need this product. They really do. I don't want anything to undermine that. But if what Scotland did is there's a report on the web, big kind of scoping review that they did of what's happening in different countries. And they saw how in Australia, for example, people were smoking the nicotine patches. And they had studies showing with the guards talking about, I don't want to go into that cell block because I feel sick from the smell of the chemicals from them burning those nicotine patches. And they looked at, the contraband issue. They looked at all this stuff, and in their mind, and this is partly because of the attitudes in the UK are different, they saw vaping as a kind of, as similar to NRT, as a NRT analog.
Right.
And so when they're switching, they start introducing vaping and other options to the prisoners ahead of time, and then segued over and then gradually took away the cigarettes a few months later. And then they surveyed the guards, they surveyed the staff. They did a bunch of great qualitative and quantitative stuff, and it's looking like they really have the answer. They said they have a very low contraband problem, and the survey results on satisfaction with vaping were really quite good. They're using, I don't know, it was a company over there that I think they were using a refillable products with. So I don't know much about the actual products. I'm quite ignorant about that. And they didn't show pictures or anything like that. But that might be something to try to find out. Maybe you get one of the researchers or someone in the prison system there to talk to you all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's you talk about contraband in prison, and I just go to this idea, here in America, we think our solution to the overdose crisis and the addiction problems we have here to close off borders and shut off the flow of illicit drugs into the country. And I'm like, we can't keep drugs out of the prison. We can't keep drugs out of one building over here in town.
Yeah, we just talked about that. You want to try
to keep drugs out of a country? Come on.
And I found with some of my public health colleagues talking about the prisoner situation and that vulnerable population and what their lives are like and everything that they're using and their trauma histories and drug histories. That was something that made people go, oh, wow, that's maybe there is a place for, and they're talking about the flavors. The product I was researching comes in some flavors as well. And a lot of people, and a lot of prisons were not selling all of the flavors, but there'd be people saying sad things like after a hard day of cleaning toilets or mopping floors, it's just to have this little treat. It's like, oh, you poor person.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many people I knew. I spent years working in the restaurant industry. I went into it, as someone who smoked, but I met countless, younger folks who came in, cooks, hosts, servers, the whole nine, who didn't smoke when they first got a job there. But a few months later, they sure did. And not only was it to go and step out of the building, get a few minutes of air, but in those really high, stressful, rough days, I knew countless people who started smoking just to cope with their work day.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I was in the service industry too. I just wanted to bring in something, going back to what you're talking about the nicotine and the mixed messaging with the whole having been demonized for so long. It's so ironic, and I actually just tweeted about this morning. Is I forget which anti-tobacco or tobacco control group it was, but I retweeted it because they had put this thing up about the nicotine pouches, and they were just like, "Oh, it's all still big tobacco. It's still all this horrible. They're just up to their own old tricks. The whole grandfather thing.
Yeah,
and they're in there saying that this is this horrible product. And so I retweeted it and I said, and kind of made out the point of, well, we've been told for years that smoking is deadly, and tobacco control tells us, or public health groups around the world say, use nicotine gum, use nicotine patches, use nicotine lozenges. So what's the difference between a nicotine gum and a tobacco-free nicotine pouch? The correct answer is nothing. There's no health difference, risk difference, and that's what's so frustrating is, so now other people are watching that, they're like, or reading stuff like that, and they're going, wait, is nicotine the bad guy? Wait, how is nicotine bad here, but it's not bad there, and it's bad in vaping, but it's not bad in a inhalable thing that you can get from, what's that, inhaler, not inhaler, that was Drew's company.
Nicotrol
inhalers.
I mean, it's just so, and now you got it to the point where, and this is one of the questions I had for you, was you mentioned in your article the very low nicotine cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I want to do a whole thing on that very low nicotine, but it's, to me, that's banking on this fear of nicotine, that this company is banking on that fear. And I'm wondering do you consider very low nicotine cigarettes a harm reduction product?
Well, that's the thing that first me. In fact, I wrote an article about this.
Oh, did you?
It's if that continuum of risk thing happened the way they talked about a few years ago, the people at the FDA, you know, if by now we had a bunch of flavored vapes and menthol flavored and, you know, tobacco flavor, everything with marketing authorizations, if we had, you know, people getting educated about nicotine and where the real risks are and so on, then I think a low nicotine cigarette might have a place in that. Because, you know, ideally you want to have, you know, different pathways that people can follow, you know, that work for them. I mean, I know you all have seen examples, you know, different things work for different people. And some people need something, you know, some kind of combustion product. And some people may need to feel, hey, this cigarette is just not giving the satisfaction, whereas this vape or this oral product is giving me this satisfaction. They may need to kind of trick their body and wean themselves over. But without all that stuff in place, I think it's kind of scary, because it has the potential to backfire and play into the idea that this must be a safer cigarette, which was what public health railed against for years. Oh my God, you know, there is no safe cigarette. Don't use safer. And yeah, so that's where I think we desperately have to get out there and say, whoa, look at, you know, whether you're talking to physicians or journalists, whatever, hey, look, smoking is going back up. It's not going away. Look at the research on what even your fellow physicians believe, that nicotine is what's giving people heart disease and cancer. It's not. And look, hey, NRT products have been available for a couple of decades now. And look how few people use them. They start and they quit. This is not, clearly it's not working for them. With all this stuff, we have to look for something else. Or do you want more kids to start smoking by seeing their parents smoking? Do you want more babies to crawl through nicotine smoke residue in the rugs, you know, at home? Do you want you have to think of some image that's going to make them go, ew.
I will never use third-hand smoke as an argument, because it's such baloney.
Okay, well, whatever. Well, you have to think about something that resonates for your particular audience, and then say, you may not know it, but let me show you my box of alternate nicotine products, of reduced harm products. Here's a big box of them. This is a pouch. This is snus. These are the different kinds of vaping systems and how these things work.
Who are we talking to right here, though? That gets back to our problem of, everybody who's watching this right now has heard us say all of this ad nauseum. And the problem is getting in front of people who, you know, and when we do things like hearings and stuff like that, they give us 2 minutes to 3 minutes to get anything out, or they just don't listen to us. Again, we're not considered stakeholders with the FDA.
Maybe with the FBI.
Right? Maybe we should get on the FBI list. That might get somebody to listen to us. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
we're do it for the right reason. Just earlier this week, we put out in our blog that this woman in the health department at the Monterey, California health department, because they just banned flavors, or they're kind of in the process, but it's pretty much going to happen. Yeah. And one of the things that, and I got it over here, Michelle House, the program coordinator for the health department, Mrs. Monterey, said that modified risk tobacco products, with quotes, that's why I'm doing that, is mostly a marketing designation made by tobacco companies. Big Tobacco's attempt to undermine the government regulation by utilizing them as harm reduction. They claimed it's just a strategy for reframing the issue, which is tobacco is tobacco. And they ended up using that line and that was what made the county, which was initially exempting the MRTP designated products from the flavor ban, put it back in there. And that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with.
I understand that. That's where, I know there's some cities near me that I've heard are banning flavors.
Well, you're in California, so everybody is.
But that's where I think you've got to hit them with something that breaks through that. Like, look, smoking is going up. Look at something. Look, NRT is not working. Look at some of these other things. And what I think you can do. One thing that occurs to me, and I'm going to have to go in a few minutes, but I know one of the things that physicians are dealing with is like often you go to a doctor and they're trying to figure out, okay, what drugs you're taking, what are you using, what might affect your health, and they're worried about, are you using supplements? That's a Wild West unregulated situation. People don't always tell them what they're using, and they're doctors, kind of feeling ignorant. And I think there's an analogy here with, we need to know what supplements our patients are using. We need to know what nicotine products our patients are using, and say, hey, we can help educate you. We could do a seminar for you at the medical school at your at your health or maintenance organization, your doctor's office, we can help you understand what products your patients might be using, so that when you talk to them, you can understand what's there. Because that is, thinking about a need that they have. And then when you're talking to them, you might be able to explain, in passing, yeah, this is something that, it doesn't have the product, it doesn't, the vapor from vaping is very different than the products of combustion. Or here's a heat not burn product. Here's how this works. And you may have to kind of use a more moderate tone than you used to, and less advocacy tone, and let them kind of go, right. Let them lead a little bit. But I think it's one way to crack it open a little bit and meet a need that they have.
If we can get in front of them, do you think it would be beneficial? Like, I've always wanted to put up a section on our website that was just for medical professionals that answered questions like what you're saying, or maybe even create a handout for our members to print out to take to their doctors. Do you think that would be something that would be beneficial?
Yeah, I think so. And I think something, I think one that's kind of like from the doctor's perspective, maybe you might want to work with one of the physicians, like, who's has some understanding of this area, because I'm not a physician. I can only deal with populations, but if it's something that's saying, here's what your patients may be using. Here's pictures of it. Here's how it comes in. Here's how it works. Here's how they will describe it. So when they tell you, here are the supplements and here are the other drugs and substances that I use, you as a physician will know what that is. And then you can also do some things saying from the patient's perspectives, why your patients may be using this, where your patients may be going for information. And if you're saying, here's where your patients are going for information, you might want to go there and find out what they're learning about. Aha, they might learn something. They might see a couple of videos. They're like, here's a video from someone. Let me play that and see what it says. You might, it's kind of sneaking under their wall.
So you're thinking, I guess I'm just confused if you're talking about us as an organization trying to somehow reach out to doctors. How do we reach out to doctors? Or are you saying our individual members should reach out to their doctors?
Either way, I think it could be individual members, or it could be you as an organization. But you have to think about what
like the medical association or something. How do we reach out to a whole bunch of doctors?
Local hospitals or something, saying, hey, we know that your patients are using, just like you've had struggle to understand the supplements people are using. We assume you're struggling to understand what nicotine products your patients are using. We've just been putting together you might even get a letter of introduction. Reach out. If you have a personal physician, you might try to talk to them and say, hey, is this something that you think people might be interested in? Would you be willing to introduce me to the right person?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. I just going off of two personal experiences in my sort of recent medical history, seeing my doctor and explaining that I switched to vaping from smoking, he was actually seemed very happy. And his attitude was, most of the people who he sees could eliminate a lot of their health issues if they would just quit smoking. And, we know, doctors know, it's very frustrating. The products that are out there, the strategies that are out there are underwhelming, and people continue to smoke. And so he was very relieved. The other example was I was hospitalized for a couple of broken ribs. And the vasovagal syndrome. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically it was touching a nerve and it causes me to pass out. Some people call it like the sissy man's disease or something like that, but it's just a real thing. It's the vagus nerve. I'm not going to get into it, but one of the nurses who was, by my side when I was getting an ultrasound at one point, I had said something about vaping. And she immediately went into attack mode and was just like, oh, it's horrible. And it's addictive and you shouldn't do that. And I turned to her and I'm pretty sure that they could see my heart starting to race on the monitor. And I just looked at her like, I quit smoking after 21 years by switching to vaping. And it took her a minute to come back and say, it's very good that you quit smoking and change your tune.
Yeah.
So it's in line with a lot of your thing. Once people see that face and they hear that experience, it does tend to change their mind.
My doctor just has anti-vaping signs all over the place.
And then in a way, it's a little bit like dealing with an anti-vaxxer, and it's a very emotional issue. And sometimes you have to listen and say, I can understand why, after everything big tobacco did, I can understand why you feel so enraged.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge people's emotion, and you have to assume goodwill on their part, that this must be coming from something that they think is important. And that's, you have to acknowledge that first before you can say, and that they've been lied to. There's some things that I've discovered in my life that are a little bit different than what you're talking about. Would it be okay if could I share a quick story with you? Something that, an experience that I had that changed the way I thought about some of this, something like that. But I think there are a lot of doctors and nurses out there who have either, seen with their patients changed lives, or have a relative or friend who has had a change. I think it is possible to find people who would be willing to be conduits and introduce you to people, or to pass around articles like the AJPH article about vaping, or share the video. Ken Warner and University of Michigan did a nice 4-minute video about summarizing that article, or the new research about how many physicians believe nicotine is what kills you. That kind of thing is like, whoa, really? I don't think they know that. And that's the coin of the realm, research kinds of things. You have to think about what are their needs? What problems can I solve for them? What do they find credible? And again, your stories as patients are credible too, within, once you've acknowledged their emotion, once it's in context. And I'm going to have to get going, but this has been so much fun talking.
We may have to have you back again. I think we have to have you back again someday.
I'd be happy to.
Awesome.
And if you've got, and I want to learn from you guys, I want to learn, talk to you and learn about what you would like to be able to say to your doctors, more about your experiences, because I have vast areas of ignorance that I think you guys would help fill in for me. And
absolutely. You know what? I handle our Twitter account, and you can message me on Twitter. I think I sent you a request. So if you want to answer that and follow us on social media, and anytime you want to talk about something, it doesn't have to be on camera. We can, change,
and we also, any of your work and research that you want to talk about. Our members are very interested in all of this stuff, and obviously this is giving us tools to take to lawmakers and regulators and our own doctors. We also have the Twitter spaces, so as new things come up, feel free to reach out, and we'd love to have you on again.
That sounds great. I'm so glad we've connected at last, and I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to
thanks, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to be doing the
Cheryl Olson.
I know, that was awesome. I couldn't believe she said yes, and that was so cool. And it's so nice, so interesting to have somebody from completely outside of our bubble. I mean, she's not completely. I mean, she was kind of into harm reduction, but as far as like our bubble, it was funny because she had kind of heard of us, and I'll tell you guys, I didn't want to take up too much time because she had to get it out before she had to leave, and she did stay an extra 10 minutes for us. But when I messaged her, we kind of went back and forth, and when she came on just before the show to kind of make sure do a sound check and stuff, and she said she had emailed me back, and she said, "Oh, your guys' website's really nice." I'm like, "Oh, she's never seen our website before," and she's like, "I thought I heard," and she on the pre-show she said, I thought she. She's like, "I thought I heard of you." So I kind of asked around, and people were like, "Yeah, they're the good guys." I thought that's awesome.
Thank you to whoever vetted CASA, to Cheryl, Dr. Cheryl Olson, because she said we're some of the good guys.
We're the good guys. I want to pick a brain on camera who said that, because I want to know who's actually out there and supporting us, and thank them for that too. So that was awesome. But I love that.
That was fantastic.
I checked up on you guys, and you got the thumbs up.
I think her coming from kind of that, looking at youth and violence in video games and things like that, and kind of starting from that like awareness of moral panics, has really helped her kind of navigate this space as well. And
understanding moral panic
with a lot of other folks, if you're like, oh, well, if you can bring up a moral panic that they know and understand really well, and you can go look at the similarities here, people start to go, oh, okay, I kind of get what you're saying. And I think that's really helpful.
You know what else helps you understand the mind of
satanic panic to vape clouds,
Well, yeah. You know what else helps you understand that kind of thing, like Dunning-Kruger and stuff like that? Watch some flat Earth videos.
Oh, God, don't, you guys. You don't have to.
I swear to God, anti-vaping people just remind me of flat earthers.
I watched a documentary one time on flat Earth, and I just remember they had gotten this machine that was gonna like prove somehow the rotation of the Earth, and so it was flat and all this and that, and they were so excited they spent all this money on this
per hour
scientific device, and they were like, this is gonna be it, this is gonna prove it. And then like the next like cut scene was to them like super bummed out and disappointed.
Because it showed 15 degree hours per hour shift. That's
They're
why
like,
it
well,
was a what do you call it?
It's funny.
I can't think what the name of it. Gyroscope. I
Yeah.
think. And it was like a $20,000 like electronic gyroscope.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Anyhow, yeah, it was beyond the curve. Yeah, that's what it was, Ian. It was beyond the curve.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
okay, anyhow. But
yes, anyway, we do still have some legislation to get into. So without any further ado, Alex, are you ready?
Do the thing.
It's weird, right? You're going to do legislation at the end of the show.
Up is down, cats and dogs living together.
It's just rain and lava today. All right, let's get into it. All right, so without actual raining lava, what do you got for us this week, sir? What do we need to keep our eyes and ears on?
Yes, Ian. Yeah.
So we'll go right to the map here. For folks in Alaska, we have a bill that was, this is the 2-year session. And we, of course, reminded folks about SB 45. The House version of this, HB 110, which has been around since the beginning of last year, is now going back to getting some attention in a committee. It's not clear to me whether or not this is a public hearing. I think Alaska kind of has a rule about it gets one public hearing and then the next meeting, not so much, by invitation only. But that does not mean that you cannot reach out to the committee and share your thoughts. So if you are in Alaska, be sure to get your opinions into the committee before Wednesday, March 9th at 1:30 p.m. Alaska Standard Time. That is the House Finance Committee. As we've mentioned before, finance committees are mostly interested in numbers. And so one of the points to make, of course, is that if Alaska does move to tax vapor products, thereby discouraging people from switching to them, they will maintain the status quo of the financial burden of early death and disease attributable to smoking. So not a really good financial move on the part of the state. But that is happening this coming Wednesday. If you're in Alaska, take action. We wrote the letter for you. Highly encourage you to edit it with your own personal story. And that is HB 110. Moving back to the
side
map.
note on that really quick, and I know I say it all the time, you guys, but when you're gonna add your personal stories, which you absolutely should do, to our pre-made emails, put them above above all of the other pre-written text that we've provided. It just helps. It helps kind of the email algorithm of things not being sent directly to spam folders. That way they're individualized. It comes up first like that. They get sent and delivered where they need to go.
Yeah, good point.
Carry on, sir.
The next stop on our 2 call to action tour this weekend is the state of Colorado. I believe we talked about this being an active thing, but for folks in Colorado, should be aware that the public hearing that we were expecting was rescheduled. I think it was originally scheduled for this Wednesday, but it has been moved. Not only the date has been moved, but the venue has been moved to a larger committee room. So clearly your voices are making a difference, and they are making accommodations for a much bigger crowd. And so this is going to be on Wednesday, March 16th now, 1:30 p.m., House Committee on Health and Insurance. This is in the old State Library, which is room 271. And again, same thing. Please get your messages in. Make sure to customize it with your personal stories. And this is Colorado HB 22-1064, or you can just do HB 1064, and they should be able to know what you're talking about. This is a flavor ban. And as we've talked about this before, this is sort of inspired by the intentional patchwork of local regulations throughout Colorado, necessitating the need for some sort of unifying or uniform state regulations, which is the strategy we've seen play out in places like Massachusetts, California, New Jersey, New York, and so on. And this is somewhat in response to the Denver mayor wisely vetoing a flavor ban there. And this is very much a real threat in Colorado, and urgently need your attention. So with that, Colorado and Alaska, herein ends the reading of the legislative rundown.
Wow. Holy cow. That
There's
was
still
the
a lot of stuff
shortest
going on,
rundown
like in
we've had in a
Maine
while.
Yeah, it's been a long time since we said there's just no rundown.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I mean, there's still other stuff. That's just the latest. I mean,
Yeah,
we still
those are
have-
that's the top of the pile.
Yeah.
There are other tax bills. There are other things that we're working on that are just not up in time for this show, or are not moving to sort of an imminent hearing. But we are watching things in places like Oklahoma, Connecticut, Indiana. I can't remember. I can't remember if Illinois has something active right now, but we're keeping an eye on things, and we'll update as things evolve.
All right. Well, what do you say? It feels weird. It's only 5:50 here. I'm used to doing shows at this point till like 9:30 at night. So
Well, I could have talked to Dr. Olson for another hour.
no,
I swear.
I'm
I
just
had
kidding.
so
We have
much-
recently though have had quite a few longer shows. So
Yeah.
we got a shorter one this week, you guys.
Yeah. Hey,
That was
everybody gets a weekend partially off.
Yeah. I've had
It says there's no
like an
update from
itchy throat all
Minnesota.
day this morning. It like started and I was like, I hope it's gone by the time the show gets here. It's gone, except every now and again creeps back in. I apologize for the coughs, you guys. But yeah, no update. Skip, thank you. Thank you.
Wisconsin's passing a pup law for.
Wisconsin already has pup laws, I believe.
Well, I mean, they're adding to it, making it worse for people who vape, for kids who vape.
Yeah.
I mean, they're increasing stuff.
Fantastic. Let's just continue to make shitty laws shittier. Great. I love that. I love that. Well, I guess that's going to do it for us this week. Huge shout out and big thanks to Dr. Cheryl Olson for joining us today. Definitely gives us all a lot to think about in the way that we approach health professionals and things like that, academia at large,
and lawmakers.
And lawmakers, yeah, exactly. You know, we've tried so many things over the years, and I've always felt like, you know, we reach a lot of people, but we don't always necessarily reach the right people, or we get the right things in front of the right people. So we obviously all have a lot of work to do there still. But I believe that we can do that. This community is strong. This community is fierce. And I definitely think that we can do that. So I guess that's going to do it. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to put one last thing on, because with all of us talking about tobacco harm reduction and all the struggles that we have, I just want to put a shout out to the people of Ukraine, and we're thinking of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That's I think we've neglected to acknowledge that is going on. And absolutely, I think all of us are thinking about this now and hoping for better outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
All right, you guys, are we ready to go?
Is that spiel time?
It's spiel time.
That's it.
All right, everybody. Spiel time. I got to do it, you guys. I'm sorry, but we're going to do the spiel. Thank you, everybody, for coming and hanging out with us today. You're amazing. You're fantastic. You make CASA what CASA is, because you are, in fact, CASA. So thank you for joining us today. If you are here and you are not yet a member of CASA, I don't know what you're waiting for. I don't even know why you're still here. Drop the stream immediately. Head over to CASA.org. Sign up today. It's absolutely free. Do all the things, get all the stuff, submit your testimonies, because we have a buttload, but we need multiple buttloads more. Okay, we need a larger load of never mind. Anyways, go do the testimonies. Yeah, I was gonna go somewhere with it, and I was like, no, this is a public. This may be an adult stream, but we're not gonna go that adult. Anyways, get those testimonies and please share your stories. They mean the world. So join CASA, check out our merch. We got some really cool, maybe it's not super new at this point, but it may be new to some people who haven't checked it out yet. Check out the merch, go do all the things over on the website. Also, if you are not following us yet on SoundCloud, I'm going to personally ask you, go follow us over on SoundCloud. We just broke 200 followers this last week over on SoundCloud. I'd love to see that number get up a little higher. That is where we upload all of our podcasts natively. And that's really where I track all of our analytics in regards to the podcast. So SoundCloud, do that. Speaking of SoundCloud, this here podcast, this live stream will get turned into 2 podcasts, 2 versions. We'll have the full version with Dr. Cheryl Olson on, and then we'll also have a shorthand version, just the legislation that Alex ran down this week. It's going to be like 4 minutes long. It's going to be the shortest legislative rundown in history, but go check out all that stuff. Go do all the things. As far as I know, we are back here same time next week, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 over on the other coast. Google foo your time zones for the rest of the world, everybody. That's going to do it for us. Be excellent to each other, everybody out there. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. Bye.